There is a quiet moment that arrives for almost everyone after 50. It might come while rising from a low chair. It might arrive during a walk that once felt effortless, but now requires just a little more intention. It might appear in the space between a restless night and a morning that begins with less energy than it once did. In that moment, a question forms. Not a dramatic question, not a fearful one, but a quiet wondering about what is happening inside the body that cannot be seen. Most people interpret these small signals as simply aging, as the inevitable slowing that comes with passing years. They accept it. They adjust to it. They assume this is how it must be. But here is what the oldest and healthiest populations on Earth have always understood, and what modern research is only now confirming. Many of the changes we attribute to aging are not caused by the passage of time at all. They are caused by something far more subtle, something that unfolds below the level of awareness over decades. And unlike the calendar, which moves in only one direction, this other factor can be influenced. It can be shaped. It can be redirected. The difference between a body that declines and a body that endures is not written in our genes as firmly as we once believed. Much of it is written in the daily choices that most people never connect to how they will feel 20 years from now. What follows is an exploration of those choices, not as a list of rules, but as a way of understanding why some bodies remain capable while others fade. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging, the unhurried biology of a long life, an examination of the daily practices that shape how we age. There is a question that eventually arrives in every thoughtful person's life, often unannounced, sometimes in the quiet of an early morning or during a pause between the day's obligations. The question is not about how to live forever. It is simpler and more profound than that. It is about how to live well for as long as we are here. How to move through the decades with ease rather than limitation. How to maintain clarity when the world grows noisy. How to preserve strength without chasing exhaustion. This question has been asked by every generation before ours. And while the answers have varied across cultures and centuries, certain patterns have emerged with remarkable consistency. Patterns that have nothing to do with quick fixes or dramatic interventions. Patterns rooted instead in the quiet accumulation of daily choices. In the foods people have reached for since before recorded history. In the ways they have moved their bodies, rested their minds, and oriented themselves towards something larger than their own immediate concerns. What follows is an exploration of those patterns, not as a set of instructions to be followed rigidly, but as a collection of observations drawn from populations that have aged unusually well, from research that has tracked human health across decades, and from the emerging science of why some bodies remain resilient while others decline. The goal is not to offer a program. The goal is to offer a lens through which to consider your own life, your own habits, and the quiet ways in which each day contributes to the decades that follow. Part 1. The body's quiet conversation. To understand how a long life is built, it helps first to understand something about the nature of the body itself. The body is not a machine in the way we often imagine. It does not operate on fixed rules of input and output, where a certain number of calories produces a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of exercise guarantees a certain level of fitness. The body is more conversational than that. It listens. It responds. It adapts. Every substance that enters the body, every movement it performs, every moment of rest or wakefulness it experiences is part of an ongoing dialogue between the external world and internal biology. The body takes in information constantly. A meal is not just fuel. It is a signal. A walk is not just motion. It is a set of instructions sent to muscles, to the heart, to the brain. Sleep is not just rest. It is a period of active maintenance. during which the body repairs what the day has worn down. This conversational nature of the body is why small daily choices matter more than occasional dramatic efforts. A single day of excellent eating does little to change the trajectory of a lifetime. But 10,000 days of reasonable eating, of consistent movement, of adequate rest, create a cumulative effect that is greater than the sum of its parts. The body learns from repetition. It becomes what it is regularly asked to be. This is also why the idea of a single intervention, a pill or a protocol that could guarantee a long life, misunderstands how biology works. The body does not respond to isolated commands. It responds to patterns. It adapts to environments. It thrives when the conditions are right over long periods, not when a single variable is temporarily optimized. Understanding this conversational quality of the body changes how we think about health. It shifts attention away from quick fixes and toward the steady accumulation of sensible habits. It makes room for imperfection, for days when choices are less than ideal, because the overall pattern matters more than any single moment. And it invites a kind of patience that is increasingly rare in a culture that wants results immediately. Part 2. What very old populations have in common. For decades, researchers have traveled to parts of the world where people live unusually long lives, not in hospitals or with intensive medical support, but in their own homes, tending gardens, walking to market, gathering with family. These regions, sometimes called blue zones, have been studied extensively, and what has emerged is not a single secret, but a collection of shared characteristics. The first and most obvious observation is that these populations eat differently than much of the modern world. Not because they follow a particular diet prescribed by experts, but because their food systems have not yet been fully transformed by industrial processing. They eat foods that are recognizable as having come from the ground or from an animal. They eat with the seasons. They eat in company. The second observation is that movement is woven into the fabric of daily life, not scheduled as a separate activity. People in these regions do not go to gyms. They walk to visit neighbors. They tend gardens. They climb stairs. They kneel to pray. They use their bodies in ordinary ways throughout the day, and the cumulative effect is a kind of functional fitness that persists into very old age. The third observation is that social connection is not optional but essential. The oldest populations maintain strong ties to family and community. They are embedded in networks of mutual support. They have roles and purposes that extend beyond their own needs. They are needed by others. And this needing and being needed appears to be as important to longevity as any nutritional factor. The fourth observation is that they tend to eat less overall than populations in wealthy industrialized nations. Not through conscious restriction, but through cultural norms around portion size, meal timing, and the composition of meals. They eat until they are no longer hungry, not until they are full. They stop. They wait. They return to food later if needed. The fifth observation, perhaps the most subtle but no less important, is that they experience stress differently. Not that they have less stress, but that they have built-in mechanisms for discharging it. Regular walks, afternoon rest, time with friends, rituals that mark transitions. These are not luxuries. They are stress management systems embedded in the culture. What is striking about these observations is how unremarkable they are. There is nothing exotic about any of them. They are the ordinary practices of ordinary people living ordinary lives. And yet, in combination, over decades, they produce outcomes that are anything but ordinary. Part 3. The protective role of certain fats. Among the foods that appear consistently in the diets of long-lived populations, one stands out for the depth of research supporting its effects. That food is olive oil. specifically the unrefined version pressed from whole olives without heat or chemicals. It has been a staple of Mediterranean diets for thousands of years, and modern research has spent decades trying to understand why. The composition of this oil is unusual. It is rich in a type of fat called monounsaturated, specifically oleic acid, which appears to support healthy blood vessel function in ways that other fats do not. But the more interesting components are the minor ones, the compounds present in small amounts that seem to have outsized effects. These are the polyphenol, natural plant chemicals that serve protective functions in the olive and appear to serve protective functions in the body as well. One of these compounds, oleocanthal, has attracted particular attention. It has been observed to have effects in the body that resemble those of certain anti-inflammatory medications, though through different mechanisms and without the same side effects. This does not mean it treats inflammatory conditions. It means that regular consumption of foods containing this compound is associated with lower levels of certain markers of inflammation in the blood. Another compound, hydroxytyrosol, is among the most potent antioxidants found in nature. It appears to protect fats in the bloodstream from a process called oxidation, which is relevant because oxidized fats are more likely to contribute to the stiffening of artery walls. By protecting these fats, the compounds in olive oil may help maintain the flexibility of blood vessels over time. The key word throughout this research is may. The evidence is suggestive but not conclusive. Populations that consume olive oil regularly have lower rates of certain age-related conditions, but they also do many other things differently. They eat more vegetables. They walk more. They rest in the afternoon. Isolating the effect of any single food is difficult, and responsible researchers do not claim certainty where it does not exist. What can be said with confidence is that replacing certain other fats with olive oil appears to be a reasonable choice. Using it in place of butter or processed vegetable oils, drizzling it over vegetables, using it in simple dressings. These are practices that have been associated with better health outcomes in large population studies. And unlike many recommendations that change with each new study, this one has remained remarkably consistent across decades of research. Part 4. The difference between refined and unrefined. Not all olive oil is the same, and this distinction matters more than most people realize. The oil that comes from the first pressing of olives, extracted without heat or chemicals, is fundamentally different from the oil that has been refined. The differences are not subtle. When olives are pressed gently, the oil retains the compounds that give it color, flavor, and biological activity. These are the polyphenol, the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory molecules. When oil is refined, whether to remove off flavors or to extend shelf life, most of these compounds are stripped away. What remains is a fat that is nutritionally similar to other refined vegetable oils. It provides calories, but not the accompanying plant compounds. This is why the term extra virgin matters. It is not a marketing phrase. It is a grade defined by chemical standards and taste tests. Extra virgin oil must meet specific criteria for acidity and must show no defects in flavor. It must be produced without refining. It must come from the first pressing. Oils labeled simply as olive oil or light olive oil are typically blends that include refined oil. They lack the compounds that make olive oil interesting from a health perspective. The practical implication is straightforward. If the goal is to include olive oil as part of a pattern of eating associated with long life, the oil should be extra virgin. It should be stored away from light and heat, both of which degrade its beneficial compounds. It should be used within months of opening, not kept on the counter for years. And it should be used in ways that preserve its qualities, drizzled over finished dishes rather than heated to high temperatures. None of this means that other oils are harmful. It means that if the interest is in the specific compounds that have drawn research attention, Those compounds are only present in meaningful amounts in the unrefined version. The choice is not between good and bad. It is between a food that contains a wide range of plant compounds and one that has been processed to remove them. Part 5. What happens in the first day? The effects of changing what we eat are often discussed in terms of years or decades. But some effects begin much sooner. Within hours of consuming certain foods, the body begins to respond. This is true of extra virgin olive oil as well. Research has documented changes in the blood within a few hours of consumption. Markers associated with inflammation have been observed to decrease. Compounds that help blood vessels relax have been seen to increase. These are not permanent changes. They are temporary responses that last for hours, not days. But when such foods are consumed regularly, the temporary responses accumulate into lasting patterns. The anti-inflammatory effect is particularly interesting. Certain compounds in olive oil appear to influence the activity of enzymes involved in producing inflammatory signals. The effect is mild compared to pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories, but it is also free of the side effects that make long-term use of those medications problematic. For someone who consumes olive oil daily, the body spends more time in a state of lower inflammatory activity. Over years, this may contribute to reduced wear and tear on tissues throughout the body. The effect on blood vessels is equally rapid. The compounds that support nitric oxide production begin working quickly, encouraging the smooth muscle lining the arteries to relax. This relaxation allows blood to flow more freely and reduces the workload on the heart. Again, the effect is temporary, but the repetition matters. Vessels that regularly experience this relaxed state may maintain their flexibility longer than vessels that do not. These early responses are not visible. There is no sensation of blood vessels relaxing or inflammation decreasing. The changes happen below the level of awareness. But they are measurable, and they provide a window into how daily food choices shape biology. The body is always listening, always responding, always adjusting. What we eat is part of the conversation. Part 6. The days that follow. As consumption continues beyond the first day, additional effects emerge. The digestive system, which processes everything that enters the body, begins to adapt. The community of microorganisms living in the gut, collectively called the microbiome, shifts in response to the compounds reaching it. Certain species thrive on the polyphenol in olive oil. Others do not. Over days and weeks, the balance tips. This matters because the gut microbiome is increasingly understood to influence far more than digestion. It communicates with the immune system. It produces compounds that affect mood. It influences how energy is extracted from food. A microbiome shaped by a diet rich in plant compounds is different from one shaped by processed foods. And these differences have consequences throughout the body. The cardiovascular system continues to respond as well. The lipid profile, the balance of different fats carried in the blood, shifts in directions associated with lower risk. The improvement is modest but measurable. Over years, modest improvements add up. For some people, there are changes in how the body handles sugar. Fats consumed with meals slow the absorption of carbohydrates, leading to smaller spikes in blood sugar after eating. Over time, this may influence how sensitive cells remain to insulin, the hormone that manages blood sugar. Stable blood sugar levels are associated with more consistent energy and fewer cravings. Even the brain appears to be affected. The same compounds that protect blood vessels elsewhere in the body also protect the tiny vessels that supply the brain. Some research suggests that certain olive oil compounds may influence the clearance of proteins that accumulate in the aging brain. Though this area of study is still young and conclusions remain tentative. What emerges from this timeline is a picture of gradual, coordinated change. No single day produces transformation, but the accumulated days produce a body that functions differently than it would without those daily choices. The changes are not dramatic. They are not visible, but they are real. Part 7. The challenge of quality. If the choice to include olive oil in daily eating were enough, the matter would be simple. But the quality of the oil matters as much as the quantity, and quality is not always easy to determine. The market for olive oil is complex, and not everything labeled extra virgin meets the standards. There are several reasons for this. One is that testing for quality requires laboratory analysis that is not always performed. Another is that definitions vary by country. A third is that fraud, the deliberate mislabeling of lower quality oil as extra virgin, has been documented repeatedly in the industry. The consumer cannot rely on labels alone. There are practical strategies for finding better oil. One is to look for harvest dates rather than best-by dates. Fresh oil is more likely to retain its beneficial compounds. Another is to seek oils from producers who provide information about where and when the olives were grown. Transparency is a reasonable signal of confidence. A third is to buy from sources that move oil quickly, small shops or direct producers rather than large warehouses where oil may sit for months or years. Storage matters after purchase as well. Light breaks down the compounds of interest, which is why quality oil comes in dark glass or opaque containers. Heat does the same, which is why oil should be kept away from the stove. Oxygen gradually degrades oil, which is why bottles should be used within a reasonable time after opening. These considerations may seem excessive for a single food, but they reflect a broader principle. The quality of what we consume matters. A food that has been processed, stored poorly, or adulterated is not the same as that food in its whole, fresh state. The compounds that make olive oil interesting are fragile. They require care to preserve. Part 8. Integration with other foods. Olive oil does not work alone. In the traditional diets where it features prominently, it is consumed alongside other foods that themselves have beneficial properties. Vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fish, small amounts of dairy and meat. The oil is part of a pattern, not an isolated intervention. This matters because many of the compounds in plant foods are fat-soluble. They dissolve in fat and are absorbed more efficiently when fat is present. The lycopene in tomatoes, the carotenoids in carrots and leafy greens, the vitamin K in broccoli. All of these are better utilized by the body when consumed with fat. Olive oil, drizzled over vegetables or used in a simple dressing, serves as a vehicle for absorption. The combination also affects satiety. Fat slows digestion, which means that meals containing olive oil leave the stomach more gradually. This leads to a slower release of nutrients into the bloodstream and a longer period of feeling satisfied after eating. For people who struggle with between-meal hunger, this can be a practical benefit. There is also the question of what olive oil replaces. When it is used in place of other fats, the comparison matters. Replacing butter or margarine with olive oil is different from adding olive oil to an already adequate diet. The net effect depends on the overall pattern, not on any single food. This is why traditional eating patterns are more informative than studies of isolated nutrients. The Mediterranean diet, for example, is not just about olive oil. It is about vegetables at every meal, fish several times per week, legumes as a staple, fruit for dessert, wine in moderation with food. Olive oil is part of this pattern, but the pattern as a whole is greater than any of its parts. Part 9. Movement as daily medicine. The same populations that eat olive oil regularly also move regularly, and this movement deserves attention separate from nutrition. The way they move is instructive. It is not the movement of athletes or gym members. It is the movement of people going about their lives. Walking is the foundation. walking to the market, walking to visit neighbors, walking to tend gardens, walking to places of worship. This walking is not brisk exercise designed to raise the heart rate. It is transportation. It is social. It is habitual. And over a lifetime, it accumulates into thousands of miles. Gardening is another form of movement common in long-lived populations. It involves digging, planting, weeding, carrying, harvesting. It uses the body in varied ways, building strength and flexibility through functional tasks. It also produces food, which connects movement directly to nourishment. Climbing stairs, carrying water, kneeling to pray, standing to cook. These are all movements that maintain capability. They keep joints mobile and muscles engaged. They prevent the deconditioning that occurs when bodies are too sedentary. The lesson from these populations is not that everyone should garden or walk to market. The lesson is that movement woven into daily life is more sustainable than movement scheduled as a separate task. When movement is required by the day, it happens without decision. When movement is optional, it requires constant motivation, and motivation fades. For people living in environments designed around cars and screens, recreating this pattern takes intention. It may mean choosing stairs over elevators, parking farther from entrances, walking for short errands instead of driving, standing while talking on the phone, gardening if space allows, finding ways to make movement part of the day rather than something added to it. Part 10. The role of enough. Not too much. Another pattern that appears consistently in long-lived populations is moderation in eating. Not extreme restriction, not fasting protocols, but a general tendency to eat less than is typical in wealthy industrialized countries. Meals are substantial enough to satisfy, but not so large that they leave people uncomfortable. There are several possible explanations for this. One is that food is less abundant and more expensive, so portion control is built into the economy of daily life. Another is that meals are eaten more slowly, often in company, allowing time for the body's fullness signals to register before more food is consumed. A third is that the composition of meals, with their high fiber and water content from vegetables, promotes fullness with fewer calories. Whatever the reasons, the result is that people in these populations tend to maintain lower body weights across the lifespan than people in modern industrial societies. They carry less fat, particularly around the midsection. This matters because excess fat, especially visceral fat deep in the abdomen, is metabolically active in ways that promote inflammation and insulin resistance. The biological mechanisms linking moderate eating to longer life are complex, but the basic observation is consistent across species. Restricting calories while maintaining adequate nutrition extends lifespan in laboratory animals. Whether this applies directly to humans is debated, but the pattern of eating lightly is associated with better health markers in human populations as well. For practical purposes, this suggests value in paying attention to portion sizes, to stopping before fullness, to eating slowly enough to recognize when hunger has been satisfied, to structuring meals around vegetables and other high-volume, lower-calorie foods. These are not new ideas, but they are ideas supported by observation of how long-lived people actually eat. Part 11. The stress that doesn't disappear. Modern life generates stress in ways that traditional societies did not experience. Not that traditional societies lacked stress. They had crop failures, injuries, infectious diseases, losses, but the stress was punctuated by recovery. It came in waves. Between the waves, there was rest. Modern stress is different. It is chronic. It comes from sources that do not go away. Emails that keep arriving. News that keeps updating. Financial pressures that extend indefinitely. Social comparisons that never stop. The body's stress response, designed for short-term threats, is activated continuously, and this continuous activation takes a toll. The stress response involves the release of hormones that increase heart rate, raise blood pressure, and mobilize energy stores. These responses are protective in the short term. They prepare the body to fight or flee. But when they persist, they contribute to wear and tear on the cardiovascular system, to disruptions in metabolism, to impaired immune function. Long-lived populations have stress, but they also have stress buffers. Afternoon rest periods that interrupt the day. Regular social connections that provide support. Physical activity that discharges tension. Rituals that mark boundaries between work and rest. Spiritual practices that put individual concerns in larger perspective. These buffers are not luxuries. They are infrastructure for managing the unavoidable pressures of being alive. They are as important to long-term health as any nutritional factor. And they are often missing in modern life, replaced by the assumption that more activity, more productivity, more achievement is always better. Reintroducing buffers does not require major life changes. It might mean a short walk after dinner, a few minutes of quiet before sleep, a regular phone call with a friend, a hobby that absorbs attention completely, a practice of gratitude. However simple, these small pauses accumulate into a different relationship with stress, one in which pressure is not constant but intermittent, with recovery built in. Part 12. The people around us. Perhaps the most overlooked factor in longevity research is the influence of other people. Long-lived populations are characterized by strong social ties. They are embedded in networks of family and community. They are not isolated. They are not alone. The mechanisms linking social connection to health are multiple. People who are connected to others have more practical support when difficulties arise. They have people to talk to, which helps process stress. They have reasons to get up in the morning. People who depend on them. Roles that matter. They are more likely to be physically active because activity is often social. They are more likely to eat well because meals are shared. Conversely, social isolation is associated with poorer health outcomes across multiple studies. The effect size is comparable to well-established risk factors like smoking and physical inactivity. Loneliness is not just uncomfortable. It is biologically costly. This is not something that can be addressed by a single intervention. Relationships take time to build and maintain. They require effort and attention. They are not always easy, but the evidence suggests they matter deeply. And for people interested in long life, paying attention to social connections is as reasonable as paying attention to diet and exercise. For some, this means investing in family relationships. For others, it means cultivating friendships. For still others, it means involvement in community organizations, religious groups, volunteer activities. The specific form matters less than the underlying reality of being connected to others in meaningful ways. Part 13. Purpose as biological signal. Closely related to social connection is the experience of purpose. Feeling that one's life has meaning, that one has something to offer, that one's presence in the world matters. This is not a sentimental idea. It is a variable that has been measured in research and associated with health outcomes. People who report a strong sense of purpose tend to live longer than those who do not. They have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. They maintain physical function longer. They show slower cognitive decline. The associations hold even after accounting for other factors like health status and socioeconomic position. How purpose might influence biology is not fully understood, but plausible pathways exist. Purpose may motivate health-promoting behaviors. It may buffer stress. It may provide psychological resources for coping with difficulty. It may influence physiological systems directly through the nervous system and its connections to the rest of the body. For people in traditional societies, purpose is often built into social roles. Elders have functions. They teach. They advise. They help raise children. They transmit knowledge. Their value is not contingent on productivity in the modern sense. It is inherent in their position in the community. In modern societies, purpose can be harder to find, especially after retirement when work-based identity and social connections may diminish. But purpose does not have to come from formal roles. It can come from relationships, from creative expression, from learning, from contributing to causes larger than oneself, from simply being present for others. The important thing is that purpose is not a luxury for those who have time to think about such things. It is a dimension of human experience with measurable consequences for how we age. Paying attention to it, cultivating it, protecting it, is part of the work of living well. Part 14. The environment we create. Our surroundings shape our behavior more than we realize. The layout of our homes, the design of our neighborhoods, the availability of healthy food, the presence of safe places to walk. All of these influence what we do each day. They make certain choices easier and others harder. Long-lived populations often live in environments that support healthy behavior without requiring constant willpower. Food is nearby and fresh. Walking is pleasant and safe. Social connection happens naturally because people are out in public spaces. The healthy choice is the easy choice. Modern environments often do the opposite. Processed food is everywhere. Fresh food requires special effort to obtain. Walking is unpleasant or unsafe. Social connection requires deliberate scheduling. The unhealthy choice is the easy choice, and resisting it requires constant vigilance. This is not a personal failing. It is a feature of the environment, and it suggests that changing behavior long-term may require changing environments, not just changing intentions. Making healthy food more accessible, making movement more convenient, making social connection more natural. For individuals, this might mean small environmental changes at home. Keeping healthy food visible and accessible. Keeping unhealthy food out of sight or out of the house entirely. Creating spaces that invite movement. Arranging furniture to encourage standing and walking. Putting shoes by the door to make walking easier. For communities, it might mean advocating for sidewalks and parks and farmers markets. For workplaces, it might mean supporting flexible schedules that allow for movement and social connection. The environment is not fixed. It is created by human choices, and it can be recreated differently. Part 15. The rhythm of days. One final pattern worth noticing in long-lived populations is the rhythm of their days. They tend to follow natural cycles. Light and dark. Activity and rest. Work and recovery. These rhythms are not imposed by schedules and devices. They emerge from the conditions of life. Waking with the sun. Working during the bright hours. Slowing as light fades. Sleeping in darkness. This pattern aligns with the body's internal clocks, the circadian rhythms that regulate hormone release, body temperature, metabolism. When these rhythms are disrupted by artificial light, irregular schedules, late-night screen use, the body's systems can become disorganized. The consequences of circadian disruption are increasingly recognized. Shift work, which forces the body to be active when it expects rest, is associated with higher rates of various health problems. Even less extreme disruptions, like staying up late on weekends and sleeping in, can create a kind of social jet lag that affects how we feel and function. Restoring natural rhythms does not require moving to a cabin in the woods. It might mean dimming lights in the evening, reducing screen time before bed, Keeping a consistent sleep schedule. Getting morning light to set the clock for the day. Eating meals at regular times. These are small adjustments, but they signal to the body when it should be alert and when it should prepare for rest. Meals themselves have rhythm in traditional cultures. The largest meal is often at midday, when activity is highest. Evening meals are lighter. This pattern, sometimes summarized as breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, aligns with metabolic rhythms. The body handles food differently at different times of day, processing it more efficiently when activity lies ahead rather than sleep. Again, the principle is not perfection. It is pattern. It is the general shape of days, not the precise details. Bodies evolved in environments with predictable rhythms, and they function best when rhythms are maintained. Part 16. The limits of knowledge. Throughout this exploration, certain phrases have appeared repeatedly. Research suggests, is associated with, may support, has been linked to. These are not hedging. They are honest acknowledgments of what science can and cannot say. Nutrition science is difficult, studying the effects of foods over decades. In free-living humans who make their own choices, is inherently imprecise. Isolating the effect of a single food from the effects of everything else people do is nearly impossible. Associations can be identified, but causation is harder to prove. This does not mean the research is worthless. It means the conclusions are provisional, subject to revision as new evidence emerges. What seems certain today may be qualified tomorrow. What seems promising may fade with further study. This is how science works, not as a collection of fixed truths, but as an ongoing process of refinement. For individuals making decisions about how to live, this uncertainty can be frustrating. It would be easier if science provided clear instructions. Eat this, not that. Do this, avoid that. Live exactly thus. But the body is more complex than that, and the evidence is more nuanced. What emerges from the uncertainty is not paralysis, but permission. Permission to make reasonable choices based on the best available evidence. Permission to adjust as new information appears. Permission to trust patterns that have worked for human populations across time, even if the mechanisms are not fully understood. Permission to live with some uncertainty, because that is the only way to live at all. Part 17. The wisdom of moderation. If there is a single principle that unites the observations in this exploration, it is moderation. Not the moderation of deprivation, but the moderation of enough. Enough food, not too much. Enough movement, not constant exertion. Enough rest, not endless sleep. Enough social connection, not perpetual company. Enough purpose, not relentless striving. Moderation is not exciting. It does not sell books or generate clicks. It does not promise transformation in 7 days or 21 days or any other arbitrary period. It offers something quieter. Sustainability. The possibility of maintaining healthy patterns for decades, not weeks. This is what the long-lived populations demonstrate. They are not following extreme protocols. They are living ordinary lives with ordinary rhythms. They are eating familiar foods, moving in familiar ways, staying connected to familiar people. They are not optimizing. They are simply living, and living long as a result. For those of us in modern societies, where extremes are celebrated and moderation seems dull, this is a difficult lesson. We want the thing that works fast. We want the secret that others do not know. We want to believe that a single change will transform everything. But the body does not work that way. It responds to steady, patient attention, not to dramatic interventions. The practical implication is not that nothing matters. It is that many small things matter, and they matter most in combination. A good diet matters more when combined with regular movement. Movement matters more when combined with adequate rest. Rest matters more when combined with social connection. Social connection matters more when combined with purpose. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Part 18. The question of when to start. There is a question that arises naturally when considering these ideas. When should one begin? Is it too late? Have too many years passed with different patterns? Is there a point beyond which changes no longer matter? The research suggests that changes matter at any age. The benefits of adopting healthier patterns do not disappear after a certain birthday. They accumulate from the moment they begin. Someone who starts walking more at 70 will gain benefits that they would not have if they had not started. Someone who improves their diet at 80 will experience effects that they would not have if they had not improved. This is not to say that earlier is irrelevant. Decades of healthy patterns produce cumulative effects that cannot be fully caught up. But the question is not whether one can achieve the same outcome as someone who started earlier. The question is whether one can achieve a better outcome than if one had not started at all. And the answer to that question is consistently yes. The body retains its capacity to respond throughout life. It continues to adapt to what it is given. Muscles still strengthen with use. Blood vessels still relax with the right signals. The brain still forms new connections. These capacities diminish with age, but they do not disappear. The body remains plastic, changeable, responsive. This means that the best time to start was decades ago. The second best time is today. Not with the expectation of reversing all effects of previous patterns, but with the understanding that today's choices will shape tomorrow's body. That every day is an opportunity to move in a better direction, even if the movement is small. Part 19. The patience required. There is a final quality that deserves attention, perhaps the most important of all. That quality is patience. The willingness to continue with sensible practices even when results are not immediately visible. The ability to trust that small daily choices accumulate into large lifetime effects. Modern culture does not cultivate patience. It cultivates urgency. It wants results now. And if results do not appear now, it wants to try something else. This orientation is fundamentally at odds with how the body works. The body operates on its own timeline. It does not hurry because we are in a hurry. It changes at the pace of biology, not the pace of culture. This is why the most successful approaches to long-term health are not the ones that promise rapid transformation. They are the ones that can be maintained indefinitely, the ones that fit into ordinary life, the ones that do not require constant motivation or exceptional willpower, the ones that become simply what we do, not what we are trying to do. Olive oil drizzled on vegetables, a walk after dinner, a phone call to a friend, an early bedtime. These are not dramatic interventions. They are not going to generate before and after photos, but they are sustainable. They can be done for decades. And over decades, they shape the body in ways that dramatic interventions cannot. The patience required is not passive. It is active. It is the daily choice to continue, to return to sensible practices after days when they were neglected, to hold the long view when the short view offers nothing. It is the recognition that health is not a destination to be reached, but a process to be maintained. It is the willingness to keep going, even when the going is unremarkable. Part 20. A final observation. The oldest people in the world do not have secrets. They have habits. They do not have protocols. They have patterns. They do not have the latest information. They have what has worked for generations before them. This is worth remembering when confronted with new studies, new recommendations, new approaches. Much of what matters for long life has been known for a very long time. Eat mostly plants. Move regularly. Stay connected to others. Find meaning. Rest. Moderate. Repeat. The science that emerges now is not discovering new principles so much as confirming old ones. It is explaining why traditional practices work, not replacing them with something better. The mechanisms are new. The wisdom is ancient. For those of us living in times of unprecedented change, this offers a kind of anchor. Amid all that is new and uncertain, some things remain steady. The body still responds to what it has always responded to. The patterns that supported human flourishing thousands of years ago still support it today. The fundamental requirements have not changed. This is not a prescription. It is an observation. An invitation to consider how we spend our days. A reminder that the small choices, repeated over time, shape the trajectory of our lives. A suggestion that perhaps the most reasonable approach to long life is also the simplest. To pay attention, to be moderate, to keep going, and to let the days accumulate into years, and the years into a life fully lived. If there is a single idea worth carrying forward from this hour together, it is this. The body is not a machine that wears out according to a fixed schedule. It is a living system that responds to how it is treated, day after day, year after year. The small choices, the ones that seem too minor to matter, are precisely the ones that accumulate into the reality of how we age. Not through dramatic intervention, but through steady, patient attention to the fundamentals that have supported human life for all of history. Enough movement, enough rest, enough connection, enough purpose, enough of the foods that have nourished generations before us. We would be honored to hear what arises for you after considering these ideas. What resonates? What questions remain? What small shift feels possible, not as another obligation, but as a gentle redirection toward how you want to feel in the years ahead? The comments below are a space for reflection, not performance. For those who find value in this archive of wisdom, the library contains many other volumes. You are welcome to explore them, to return to them, to let them accompany you on a journey that is yours alone. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.